Finally, a do-it-yourself fairing repair product that works. Fairing Repair is a heavy-bodied filler cement designed to easily repair all ABS plastic fairings, panels, and fenders. Even the most severely damaged panels can be repaired at a fraction of the cost of new panels. There is no mixing or adding of hardeners or catalysts. Begin reassembling the damaged fairing. Tape the fairing back together from the front sides using masking tape. Do not try and put any repair compound between the cracks or you will distort the shape of the fairing. You need to get the fairing back to the original shape. If you are missing pieces, do not worry about it at this point, as you can fill in the missing pieces later. Next, you need to remove the paint, dirt, and grease from the back side of the damaged area. I use a Dremel tool, but you can use a knife, file, or sandpaper. The area around the damage needs to be clean plastic for at least 1/4 of an inch on all sides. Now you're ready to put on the fairing repair compound. Simply apply directly out of the applicator bottle to the area you have cleaned off. You should have a continuous bead of fairing repair about 1/8 of an inch thick and about 1/4 inch on each side of the crack. Once you have finished applying the fairing repair, put the fairing aside and do not disturb it for 24 hours. If you have missing pieces, you can now add in those pieces with the supplied ABS sheet stock. Rough cut them to fit, tape them into place, and use the fairing repair compound to fill in the gaps. Remove the tape from the front side. If the crack is not visible, you can build up a little more fairing repair on the back side and not need to do any more to the front. If you need to work on the front side, groove out the cracks from the front. Again, I use a Dremel tool, which I recommend. Groove down into the plastic at least halfway through the material, but not more than 75% through the fairing. Apply fairing repair just as you did on the back side. Apply enough to fill the grooves slightly above the surface of the fairing. Do not overfill, as you will need to sand the surface. When you are finished, again put the fairing aside and do not disturb it for 24 hours. Using sandpaper of 80 to 120 grit, sand the damaged area. As you go, reduce the grit of the sandpaper to a finer grit to avoid scratches. If you use a power sander, go slow and stop often to let the surface cool down. Heating the surface at this point will cause the fairing repair to ball up and pull out of the groove. When you're finished, you should be down to 220 grit sandpaper. If the crack is not into any of the decals, you can mask over the decals and use an X-Acto knife and cut around the decal. This will save the cost of putting on new decals. Using a good quality primer, paint the damaged area of the fairing. This will fill in any fine scratches and will show up any imperfections while the paint is wet. If you need to fill any minor imperfections or scratches, use an acrylic spot putty for flexible surfaces. Do not use fiberglass body filler, as it will crack up and fall out because it is not made for flexible repairs. Using fine grit sandpaper, 220 or finer, to sand the primer. If you need to apply more primer to fill in the fine scratches, do so. When you're finished, you must sand the entire fairing. There should be no shiny areas. All surface must be sanded dull. The surface of the fairing should be wiped down to remove all dust. A tack cloth can be purchased from your local automotive store and should be used before a final painting. Using even strokes and let up on the nozzle as you reach the end of the stroke. Do not try and put on too much paint at any one time or you will cause runs. Wait between coats. The paint should have a wait time printed on the instructions on the can. Let the final coat dry at least 24 hours. You can gauge the dryness of the paint by touching the taped area over the decals. When the paint is dry, carefully remove the tape. Congratulate yourself on a job well done. Reinstall the fairing and go for a ride.